Well, I think we can go ahead and kick things off. I'm so excited for this one. So today's go-to-market panel is on moving from sales-led to product-led, which feels like the hottest topic of 2022. And we have three incredible panelists. So we have Rob, who is a head of product-led sales at Guru. He is a best-selling author, and he's an early champion of all things product-led sales. So I think Rob had product-led sales on his LinkedIn before anyone in the world. So we'll give Rob that credit. And then we have Karishma, who I also met almost probably a year ago because of her expertise on product-led sales. And she has over 8 years of experience with B2B SaaS marketing. And she now leads a lot of growth marketing initiatives at Vidyard, and they helped go through that transition. And then Madhukar is currently head of growth at DevRev. Previously, he helped Nutanix transform their sales-led business to PLG as the VP of Product and Solutions Marketing. So I am pumped to learn from all of you. We have 4 topics that we're going to go through today. First is product-led growth right for you? The next is going from 0 to 1 with product-led. The next is setting up the team. And then finally, how to measure success. So feel free to interrupt me with questions. Either you can raise your hand, put it in chat, just scream it out. And then otherwise, I have lots of other questions and I'm excited to learn from you all. So the first question I'd love to start out with, if each of you can tell us about your company, your role, and your go-to-market motion, whether that's PLG, some sort of hybrid, sales assisted, et cetera. And maybe we can start with you, Karishma.
Sure. So like Alexa said, I lead growth marketing at Vidyard. So my team basically focuses on the entire customer journey for our free user base. So right from user acquisition to retention and monetization. And just to give you a quick overview of Vidyard, we're a video creation platform that allows you to record and send videos to your colleagues and your customers. And we focus very much on the sales persona. So we're used by salespeople across the world to basically communicate with their prospects and customers asynchronously. So we actually started out with a very much a sales-led motion, and then over time pivoted into a product-led motion. And today our model is, I would say, hybrid. So we have like a PLG side, which is completely self-serve enabled. And then we have a sales-led side, and it's kind of split up also by user segment. So we have a lot of our smaller customers being driven through the PLG cycle. And then we have like a more high-touch enterprise play, which is focused on the sales-led motion. So today we're kind of balancing both things, and then have a lot of like steps to take further in the PLG piece, like just to improve, aspects of that. But that's where we're currently at.
Sure. So yeah, I'm head of growth at a company called DevRev, which was founded in the center of the pandemic, which is October 2020. It was founded by the same folks who co-founded Nutanix and then took it from 0 to $1.8 billion from 2009 onwards. $1.8 billion in revenue, over 17,000 customers and about 7,000 employees. So I used to be at Nutanix with Dheeraj at that point and a few other folks. And my personal background is I moved over from being a journalist to a developer to product manager to product marketing. And so at heart, I still feel like a developer. So what we were doing at DevRev is close to what I have always wanted to do. So in effect, what we do is, if you think from a developer perspective, they don't necessarily work in the CRM. That's where the sales folks are. That's where the marketing folks are. And so when you're working on your stuff, whether it's through Jira or Slack or whatever, or GitHub, you often don't have the context of the customer or the impact of that bug fix or feature to your overall business. So what we are building is what we call as a CRM for developers. It's basically getting them, the makers, closer to their customers through their product. So any work that they do, they know immediately how is the customer being affected and what is the overall revenue. Yeah, so in terms of whether we do PLG or SLG, I think similar to what Karishma said, in my background, and I've worked at Oracle, I've worked at HP, I've worked at Zora, worked at Redis as well. What I've always seen is that there is no either or, whether you're going to do sales or PLG, you have to do both. You go after the user base, which is your B2C motion, and that's what I would say is PLG. But at the same time, you also want to have a infrastructure, process, people to also go after the bigger enterprise accounts as well. Now, which one do you do first and which one are you going to do later on? What percentage, that's still debatable, works differently on different companies. But here, based on all our learning in the past, that's what we are building from ground up. And we just released our beta as well.
That's awesome. Rob, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so we are at Guru in a very similar stage as Karishma and Madhukar's companies, where we started as a very sales-led company where everything was outbound and driven human to human, to where we are now, which is a hybrid of product-led and sales-led based on things like segment and type of person. What Guru does is we're a wiki that allows people to have the information they need to do their jobs in whatever system they're working in. So obvious network effects there between the people who are looking information and constantly asking experts for help, and the experts that then capture and store that information so other folks can use it.
And Rob, how did you know that? So since you were there when it was originally sales-led, how did you know that moving to product-led was the right choice for Guru?
Yeah, I would say it's two things. And the first one I would point to is the fact that we had those network effects that could allow something like our product to expand organically. You had a system that was more valuable with every single person and every single piece of information that joined it, right? And so I think like as the macro trends started to take shape, where companies like ours with network effects like ours saw the obvious benefits of being product led or ultimately the hybrid, we started to shift in that direction, starting by reopening our free trial, then by creating a freemium free forever plan. Those were some of the first steps as a company we took in order to become product led in quotes. But the second thing, in addition to just the network effects, was really matching how people buy in their personal lives. Whether or not a company is product-led in quotes, the reality is that their customers probably want to get their hands on and try something. And so that's where just finding ways to be more of an experiential than just a tell and show type of process, that's where we tried to open that up a little bit too.
I love that. So it wasn't like one day we're going to wake up and decide we are going to become product led. It was kind of step by step, different things in the product and the sales motion. So can you walk us through that again? You said first it was a free trial and then you had a freemium product. What was the order of operations there?
Incidentally, Guru was actually a product-led company before that term even existed. It started as a Google chat bot to help people find information while they were in Google Chat. As the company then started to evolve, thoughts were, let's go up market, let's go totally sales-led. And, ultimately that's where, for all of the reasons that I mentioned, we shifted from the very sales-led, very enterprise only to the hybrid model. So yeah, it was a series of steps, starting with let's just turn back on the free trial and have CTAs on the website. That's like get a demo or start a trial. Then let's build out a totally free offering, which folks could use forever without ever having to pay. And then all of the other people and operational and strategy and pricing and packaging, all of the other things that took place over the next 2+ years kind of fell off those initial decisions. But again, it was really rooted in we felt that our product had some of the secret sauces that product-led companies tend to have, and our buyers, individual people who are used to buying a certain way in their personal lives, more or less demanded that type of an experience be an option for them.
Love it. Later on, I'm excited to dive into kind of what the outcome of that looked like. But keeping on the same topic, Madhukar, similar question to you. What was the impetus and what did the evolution look like when you were at Nutanix?
Nutanix, yeah. So it sounds like a cereal box. And in fact, that was a joke inside the company too. But for us, there were a number of different things. Of course, the company was founded in 2009. And what they did was they make software for data centers. So if you wanted to create your own AWS, you could go and buy boxes from Nutanix, which was real hardware devices. So that was kind of the history. The selling motion was primarily all through, of course, sales, account managers, enterprise partners, channel, and so on. So it was a very heavy sales-led motion, organization, all that. And I think a few years later, it was the CEO who moved the entire company from a one-time sale to a subscription model, which is similar to what you might have seen at Adobe talk about, and Cisco, and even Oracle for that matter. And so in that process, a lot of the focus went towards the product. And I joined, I guess, around 2019, when there were a lot of discussions around product-led and things that we were going to do inside of the product as well. But it had virtualized to a point you could run it inside the cloud without running it inside the hardware. So for us, it was actually a pure experimentation that got into what we called as test drive. There's a person in my team, he managed to run all of Nutanix on Google Cloud one day. And we were sitting around and said, this is so cool, this is so useful. What if we actually open it up for our own customers so that they could go and just try out this cluster? And those clusters are pretty heavy with a lot of RAM, and it costs a good amount of money to run them on Google Cloud. So we opened it up, and the very first day, we had a bunch of crypto miners, and suddenly we started to see that people are using our test drives to mine for Bitcoin. So we figured that out, shut it down. But it was a process from that on where we started to test with hypotheses. We said, okay, what if we put a form in front of it? What if we created this test drive and we only opened it up after they give us certain information? And once they're in, then we said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually do walk me inside it and tell them, do this, do that, do this. And then all of a sudden, our overall number of test drives for non-employees, it went from 0 to about 180-ish per day that we were seeing in the next 10 to 12 months. But it was step-by-step, all hypotheses. We said, what if we did this? What if we did that? And then we continue to build on top of that.
Awesome. I love the topic of kind of experimentation. I feel like that ties a lot with product-led of, you're not going to get it right the first time. And sometimes things might happen that weren't expected, but it's kind of a series of different experiments to get to where you want to be. And Karishma, so you come from not the sales side, but the marketing and growth marketing side. So how did you get looped into this major initiative of moving from sales-led to product-led?
Yeah, so from Vidyard's perspective, I think we saw PLG very much in the light of category creation. So we've been in the market for about, I believe, 12 years now. So we were very much early in creating the category for asynchronous video. Like with COVID starting out like a year and a half ago, like we saw the market just explode with people going digital and more people needing to communicate async. But we were very much early in that game, and we saw PLG as an opportunity to really build groundswell and help us build that category just by getting the word out. So we very much saw it as like an acquisition engine. By opening up our product for free, we would be able to acquire more users and have those users understand more about the category of async video, and then over time show them the value that our product had, and then really just help us build that category. So that's kind of the perspective we saw it with. And then around the time of the pandemic, we really decided to double down on PLG. And that's when I kind of came into the team as well to help us build out like the marketing motion, because I think go-to-market, like the marketing team is a super critical piece in your PLG strategy. It's just changing the profile of the types of users you acquire. So for example, when we were a sales-led organization, our acquisition strategy was very much focused on decision makers. So VPs of sales, CROs, and it was very much top-down, right? So the VP sales would start the sales cycle with us and then influence their team to use the product because the decision was made by them. But with the shift to PLG, we also had to shift our acquisition strategy to start to acquire end users, which would be the account executives and the sales reps who would be using our product on a day-to-day, and then build out that bottoms-up strategy where they're using the product, seeing the value, and then convincing their VP sales or CRO that they should buy the product. And with that comes a change in how you approach marketing as well, where marketing is no longer just acquisition driven, but you also have to think about user engagement, retention, onboarding. And then that opens up a whole host of possibilities of just collaborating better with your product team, with your sales team, and enabling the whole self-serve piece from there. So that's kind of the goal of marketing at Vidyard, is to really help tie into those cross-functional pieces, help influence the product roadmap so we're able to drive more self-serve adoption, and then acquire the right types of users. So, right from decision makers to end users who will eventually end up using our product and then influence like the buying cycle.
Very cool. So when you were brought in early pandemic, you started to make this shift. What were some of the goals of the organization? Did you have like set in stone quantitative goals of we must meet these metrics, and were they goals company-wide? Were they marketing different than sales? What were the goals and how did you set to achieve them?
Yeah, so I would say like when I came in pre-pandemic, we already had the PLG motion in place because I think even before the pandemic, Vidyard saw it as an opportunity. It was just the pandemic like accelerated that whole shift. And we already had, the freemium plan was up and running. We had a free Chrome extension. And we also had like a pro plan, which is a cheaper tier that we offered, which was also self-serve driven. But the organization kind of still had disparate goals across sales, marketing, and product. So they weren't like super unified and cross-functional. So sales was like, working towards still acquiring more decision makers because that was kind of what we were used to in the past with the sales-led motion. But then marketing and product, or more so product, had all of these ideas about going self-serve, but they didn't necessarily get full support from sales and marketing. So there was like a lot of functional, like cross-functional alignment pieces that had to be fixed. And I think over time, we've come to a stage where we now have growth teams, which are basically product first. So they're product enabled, but then we have marketers, designers, customer support executives and stuff like that to just support everything that product is doing on the growth side. So it's a lot more cross-functional today. And like we have shared OKRs compared to before when things were a bit more disparate.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you are more traditional sales led, it does feel like the different groups are working on their own things versus product led. You kind of, the lines get a little blurred and marketing starts owning things that you say, like I didn't know market, like it gets into the point of also like, what is a PQL? Like it's definitely a cross-functional game.
Yeah. And one thing I would say as well, it was a tough sell for us on the sales side initially because the AEs look at the freemium plan as almost cannibalizing into revenue that they were like previously used to. Just so you now have like these end users who may not necessarily have the budget to buy the product right off the bat. And so the sales team automatically would drop focus on these users just because they're less likely to monetize compared to a decision maker. So we're now reaching a stage where we've kind of figured out motions where the product does most of the heavy lifting for these end users, while sales can then stay hyper focused on converting decision makers once we bring a decision maker into the funnel. And building out like an account-based strategy has also been critical in that.
It's an interesting point that I want to ask Madhukar and Rob, both of you, around, was there any pushback to getting buy-in for this strategy, and kind of how did you get buy-in if there was pushback?
Well, at least in our particular case, sure, because folks are generally resistant to change until they start to see how it can benefit them and learn to trust it. So I'll just touch on one specific example where there was a little bit of pushback, which was with respect to trial extensions. Something like that in a sales-led process where sales is truly leading the process, maybe you don't give a trial extension unless there's some sort of a give-get, like you introduce me to the decision maker, I'll extend your trial, that sort of thing. And this has been, since the dawn of sales, give-gets are a thing. And in a product-led world, as we know, it's about how can you reduce friction within reason. And that was one early decision that we made, which was like, within reason, if someone needs a couple extra days to really understand if the product is right for them in the trial, like let's just extend it for them and trust that then the commercial opportunity will happen if we do right by them by eliminating the friction. So that's one example where we saw some pushback.
It's actually a good point that I heard both of you touch on, where it's kind of potential cannibalization of, you have a product-led motion, salespeople come on. How do you not make it so salespeople are talking to customers that would be self-serve and wouldn't need to talk to, like, where is that cutoff, and how do you make sure that sales is not stepping on territory that's not theirs and vice versa? And I'm sure this goes to a lot of things. It goes to segmentation, it goes to aligning incentives. I'm curious to hear what's worked from your end.
Yeah, so just to add on to whatever Rob was saying, in terms of pushbacks, what we saw, obviously we had about 7,000 employees, so pretty sizable marketing team, 220, and much bigger SE or sales engineering team. So we knew that the sales team were using things like POCs, proof of concepts. And typically the sales engineer would go and create a cluster and then keep that cluster on for like 6-7 months. So when we started with the test drive, so one pushback was, hey, now you're going to do away the POCs and do away with all the personalized stuff that we do for the customers. But we gave them the test drive and say, try it. You don't have to do any work. And after 4 hours, you can just remove it. So we started with the adoption with the sales engineering team, and then that took on with the education team. And then it took on with the partners as well, which had a multiplier effect. And the other thing we also noticed was even pushback from our own marketing teams. Like the first thing that somebody asked when I was presenting this across the pond, so to speak, was, hey, would I lose attribution for my campaign? Like if somebody takes a test drive, then does it count as your conversion or does it count as my conversion? So we were like, we are not going to do attribution. This is a tool, you run your campaign, and this will count towards your campaign. But over a period of time, we would say that, these many people took test drive, and we'll tie it back to the pipeline revenue touched, as well as any customer that had a certain bigger deal and so on. So we've found resistance in both the places. And luckily for us, we got lucky that we were able to work through them and worked incredibly well at the end of it all.
Really interesting. I want to pause for a second. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute or write it in the chat. I'll keep going, but interrupt me if you need anything. Any other thing, Rob and Karishma, on the point of not stepping on each other's toes and moving forward as a company?
I think on this, for the segmentation piece that we just touched on, like one way we're trying to avoid the cannibalization issue is by having sales just really focus on the personas that are most likely to convert into an opportunity or a deal, which is those decision makers, the VPs and CROs and anyone that basically has budget to be able to quickly make a decision. And then we basically, for the product team and the marketing team, the goal is to really acquire and engage those end users so that we build groundswell within an account. So let's say, for example, someone from Calendly signs up. If there is no decision maker on that account that can help convert it into an opportunity, the focus on the marketing team side will be to acquire more people within Calendly, get them to use the product. And at this point, sales isn't playing a role at all, right? It's marketing, acquiring these end users, products doing the work in terms of like getting them onboarded, retaining them. And then eventually when a decision maker signs up is where we bring sales in, because we say, hey, now this account is kind of ripe to convert. Let's take it to that next level. So by really like clearing out where sales gets involved and bringing them in just at the right time, it's helping us like drive better momentum and then also help like avoid teams stepping on each other's toes and then sales feeling like, free is cannibalizing into their revenue. Because I think the biggest frustration for salespeople comes when they have to spend a lot of time across accounts that are less likely to convert or across like leads that are less likely to convert. So if you can like focus on just getting them the best ones, you're kind of able to drive better alignment. So that's one piece that we've been working on refining.
And then how do you so you're literally saying salespeople don't touch this until there's someone senior enough on the product?
In some ways, yes. Like I would say there are some exceptions to the rule, but I would say that sales now has a very strong prioritization lens that they prioritize an account only when there is someone that is likely to make a decision, or if there are like enough free users in there for them to do some outbound. For example, we do have enterprise accounts as well that may not be paying customers, but they may have like 50 free users of Vidyard, right? At this point, the salesperson sees an outbound opportunity to reach out to the VP sales or a decision maker on that account and say like, hey, 40 people or 50 people in your team are using Vidyard. Why not consider a conversation? So it can be both inbound and outbound, but we're as much as possible trying to focus the sales team on that persona while product and marketing focus on acquiring these end users and making sure they're successful. Because our pricing model is also kind of structured in that way where I think we need to really focus on one type of persona.
Don, did that answer your question? Or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think that answered it. It's just it's an interesting item to try to figure out when that right person comes into the product and how to target them properly, because you'll get a bunch of kind of noise in there. But yeah, it covered it well enough. Thank you.
Awesome. Dan, do you want to ask your question?
Let me just jump off. You said when you got a specific user into Calendly and it wasn't the kind of user you were looking for in order to activate a larger account, that you would go and then acquire more people from Calendly. Like there's so many different ways to do that. What method do you use to acquire more Calendly?
Yeah. So like how Rob mentioned that, their product has like a viral factor. Vidyard does too. Like when you create and share a video with a colleague, there's like a viral loop in there where we have a CTA where the colleague is more likely to then sign up and create an account themselves and create their next video. So one big piece that we try to focus on is just user referral. So getting more people, more end users to refer other people within their teams, really like bring in more of those personas and then building up groundswell within that account. So we have like multiple people in that account that are now using and adopting. And then from there, the sales team will go on LinkedIn and research who the decision makers might be on that account and then reach out. So it's really around like driving more product usage and adoption and then improving groundswell and building up that account to have more people come in.
Yep.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So essentially you're just building good referrals and referral marketing into the product, letting that take care of itself. So that's one layer. And then you're using your sales team to do some research on social and engage people directly, probably using your own tool.
Exactly. Yeah. From another channel that we actually also tap into is performance marketing. So when we've got accounts that have signed up for Vidyard. So let's take the Calendly example. Let's say someone from Calendly is signed up for Vidyard. We would then target Calendly as a prospect on our ad platforms and try to acquire more people within the Calendly as well. So we have the referral engine, which is more organic, but then we also have the paid marketing engine, which is trying to drive up groundswell by acquiring more people within target accounts that we want to grow.
That's interesting. Can I ask a follow-up question? Are there more questions in the chat?
Go for it.
Awesome. So gosh, do you set an account list ahead of time to trigger like when certain accounts you're like, okay, we got 200 accounts. Oh, one of them just came through. And did you trigger advertising automatically to go find that IP? Or do you just have an internal process that your team then runs to go and target that account?
Yeah. So our account lists are actually not like pre-built by us in the sense that it's not like an outbound list. It's more of an inbound list. So it's based off of all the accounts that sign up within all the accounts that we have in our database that we have deemed to be high priority. So we might have like employee size criteria or industry criteria and things like that. And then that gets automatically pushed into our ad platforms. Like those account names get pushed into our ad platforms, and then we reach out to more people within those accounts.
Awesome. Maybe we'll give Karishma a break from a little and we'll switch the next two questions to Rob and Vidyard. The next two questions I think can go hand in hand from Chris and Noah, where it's how do you use product usage to enable your A's and SDRs, which then go hand in hand with shifting the sales motion?
Yeah, I can talk about what we did earlier and what we're working on doing right now. So one of the things we used to do was we had Intercom as the conversation engine on the front end. I was capturing all the conversations coming in. And we did, over a period of time, we connected it to Slack. And then we also connected it to a calendar. So now if somebody comes in and takes a test drive and they have a question or there's a conversation, somebody from our organization in Slack can talk to them directly. And that gave us an idea that, hey, we need to really involve the AEs if their customers are coming in a test drive. So what we were able to do was through Intercom, we were able to directly inside of Salesforce, tell the AE that, hey, your customer just came in and took a test drive. And here's a suggested idea of what you want to do. So I think that was one part of it. And then of course, education event everywhere where there was a demo, we replaced it with what we had done, which was available through a browser. And then of course, it took off quite a bit.
Awesome. Rob, do you want to go ahead with your thoughts on product usage?
Yeah, one of the things, and I think this is probably the first thing that you'd want to do when thinking about product usage, is start to think about what are the inherent challenges that your customer might be having when evaluating your technology. And that could be like an end user trying to apply it to their use case, or an executive trying to gauge the value and whether or not to sign the check. But if you can list out 5, 6, we have, I think, 6 of those specific things, then you can go and start to say, what are clues that you might find within product usage that could tell you that this person might be having this challenge? So, for example, then when we look at this particular product signal, if it's spiked up like this over the last couple of weeks, that might indicate that they have this thing that we can then help them with. And then the last piece is then who within our company, whether it be an account executive helping the folks that have those challenges in larger organizations, and what tactics would they use, cross-functional demos, proofs of concept, ROI, business cases, et cetera. So are we going to use those tools at our disposal and people to help the customer overcome those challenges? Or do we use a lower touch option like a product specialist team and a one-to-many group consult call that's relevant for that particular challenge? So again, thinking about the product usage as potential clues into specific challenges that your customer might have. And that's going to be different for every company's customers.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rob. So one of the things I was thinking, what we also experimented with was we had a hypothesis about what are the different pain points. So we actually created 5 or 6 different test drives for the specific pain point. So we said, oh, you have an issue with storage, or if you have an issue with cloud, then go do this test drive versus that. So that kind of gave us a little bit of intent as well on what they were looking for. And then we would reroute it back to the AEs.
I love both of those points. And I think something, Rob, I know just from talking to you a bunch about your product specialist team, it seems like they had a big part in doing the routing and documentation and codifying kind of how to respond so that you can scale product-led sales. Can you talk a little bit about standing up what a product specialist team is, and then how you stood it up and what their roles are?
Totally. So I guess kind of the first thing, assuming you guys are all on this call making the shift in some way, shape, or form from sales-led or product-led, one of the things that I've seen, and this is certainly the case for us at Guru, is that one of two things might be true. Either your product is a very complex product that may never lend itself to being truly self-serve, or your product could get there, but it really was designed for sales-led, and it's not maybe as refined as some of these PLG case studies that we all know and love that were designed from the ground up to be product-led, right? So if you fit into either of those two camps, which was certainly the case for us, you then think about like who within our company could take on the challenge of being there to help people adopt the product. And so for us, what we did was we pulled some folks from a couple of different teams, a person from technical support, a person from account management, a person from SDR. And those different people's different skills kind of form the basis of what this role has now become, which is a little bit of a Swiss Army knife role, whose ultimate charter is really to help customers overcome friction to adopt the product in a way that drives downstream to greater adoption, which leads to conversion, expansion, retention, et cetera. So that was kind of how we thought about standing up the team. And I think like for each of you guys, if you're considering making the shift or in the process, I would definitely think through and evaluate like what's reasonable within our current product that people could actually do themselves. And is it okay if we need to use humans to help them do more? Because it's not like you're ripping them out of the self-serve product to go and have a sales conversation, right? It's probably like you're drafting in with optionality around like, you might be struggling with this. I can help you with exactly that in the product. And then the commercialization will likely spring off of that reduction of friction.
And that makes a lot of sense in I love how you built the team and it had a little bit of account management, support, SDR all in one. So now when you're recruiting new folks externally, how do you find people? Because I don't think you can find all three in one. That feels like a little bit of a unicorn. What do you look for?
Yeah, what's interesting is that we now have positioned this role as like a springboard into other roles, right? Everybody knows how hard it is to hire, especially for high leverage roles like AE or AM. So we feel if we can get people with the right character attributes into this role and make them experts on the product, on how customers use the product to solve certain problems, we train them on how to run group calls and one-on-one calls. Then from there, they're likely in a really good position to then take on the additional responsibilities of an AE or a CSM or an AM. So some of the things we're looking for now that we have this role stood up and proven out is probably on the early side of their career arc, less from a perspective of total experience, but more in terms of like, are they new to tech? So we have folks on our team now that have spent years in higher education and they want to break into tech. This is a great role for them to do so. Are they intellectually curious? Like, do they approach things with the perspective of, I need to understand my customer before I can prescribe? Do they have a leaning towards how the product works? I kind of liken that to someone who in the old sales-led world might have been drawn to a sales engineer position as opposed to an AE position. So that's a little bit about the type of person that we have now. And yeah, again, like every business is different, but if you have the opportunity to create this role, I definitely would recommend exploring it. It's typically more junior folks that you can get in, really mold in the way that your company wants and progressively grow them from there.
I love it. It's very impressive what you've done with that team, Rob. Madhukar and Karishma, do you have a similar role of product specialist, sales assist, maybe this intersection of support and sales and being traffic controllers? Does that role exist? And if so, what does it look like?
Yeah, in our team, at least, given that we are building this from scratch, the way we are approaching this is a little bit of context. I feel in a true PLG world, your website kind of merges with your application. And so what used to be earlier, where marketing has your own website, they probably have an agency working on that website, and it's completely disconnected to your actual application and the identity of the customer, becomes a problem later on. So the fact that the website and your app is merging, we are trying to approach it as if the experience of PLG is a product by itself. So if I was building for product, I would essentially have 3 different roles. And that's what we're doing. First one is a growth engineer. And the growth engineer should be able to understand what is a CDP, how do you connect Google Analytics, how do you create conversions, where does the data flow, where does it end, and how do you do final end reporting on that. The second one, which again, I feel is critical to any PLG team, is a product manager. And the reason for that is the product manager, they bring the PM skills to figure out what is the user journey looking like. What are some good UX principles to make sure that the person does what we want them to do, which effectively leads to a certain event. And so the second one has to be a PM, manage the features, manage the roadmap, manage the overall customer journey. And then the third one is a general marketer. So it's a pod of 3 people. And the general marketers are the ones is the one who's thinking about what should be the content, how do I do more acquisition, how do I increase the engagement time, and everything that goes along with it in social, paid, and so on. So recap, I would say the way we are thinking about it is it's a pod of 3 people: growth engineer, product manager, and a general marketer.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you're focusing on it more from like the technical side, whereas Rob may be going after more of the customer facing. And Karishma, I know that you all have video coaches. Does that align with this similar role?
Yeah, so with the video coaches, it's very much aligned with like a sales assist kind of strategy. So the goal of a video coach is to basically help users get started with Vidyard without the intention of directly pitching Vidyard. So the idea is to like sort of help drive that product value without necessarily doing it completely in the product alone. So to give users that additional push. So that's basically what we experimented with. I think like the format of it is still something we're iterating on. Like we still need to figure out like the best ways to be able to measure that team's success. So maybe, Rob, I might just pick your brains on that later on. But I also wanted to share in my previous company, ChargeBee, I was leading the self-serve side of things. And one piece that we were experimenting with was building out a sales assist team, because ChargeBee is a super technical product. And it did at that point require that additional push for users to like initially see that value. In some cases, not all. And one of the ways in which we thought about career development was very much like how you mentioned, Rob, which is that we hired folks that, had that drive and that hunger to learn on the product side of things, and then use the sales assist role to really help them develop those product expert skills, made them product experts. And from there, they were able to transition into like either product roles or CX roles. Like there's someone on that team that started off as a self-serve or a sales assist kind of expert, and then they're now in the CX team. So I think it can be like a great stepping stone to get users like to get employees to become like product experts, and then have them kind of move up depending on where they fit in.
Very cool. I love that. Franco, then Jennifer, I think we can squeeze both in the last 4 minutes. Franco, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my question is piggybacking off of this discussion to see if you've created different reporting structures to support these growth teams. And if you didn't, in retrospect, in hindsight, would have that created or reduced the internal friction to have these teams aligned on a singular objective of making PLG successful?
The biggest piece for us was actually that team structure at Vidyard. So with the video coaches, they were sitting within the sales team, but we didn't actually find that was super aligned because sales has completely different objectives. So we're kind of rethinking that format now to maybe see if they should sit within CX or another function. Maybe Rob, you have like more insights to share on where they fit within the larger.
Yeah, this is one of the things I think is so cool about the function is it will vary company to company. So in Karishma's case, they found that sales wasn't the best. In our case, we do have product specialists reporting up through sales. I've heard similar functions reporting up through product, which it sounds like is similar to Madhukar's example that he shared. So I think I would suggest it's different for every business. And I also suggest the point that you made with respect to the goal might even be more important than where they sit within the organization. So for example, our sales assist team has like a very tangential goal to the rest of the folks on the sales team. The sellers are comped and gold on ARR, whereas the sales assist team is new logos. So similar, just a different flavor. So they're all rowing in the same direction. And if a product specialist says this is above a certain size and they're highly engaged and they have one of those 6 challenge areas, they're just as inclined to pass that off to the sales rep because, you know, the goal is aligned. So I think there's probably 2 pieces there, which is the reporting structure, but then also the goaling.
Thank you.
And then Jennifer, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, you just kind of covered on with your last answer, Rob, but we're a smaller startup, around 30 people. And so there's a lot of crossed lines that are happening. And I'm the director of sales, where do we cut that line off from? When does it hand off to customer support? Customer support, obviously complaining that all they're doing is answering problems and want to be part of the success team. And when does it hand back to sales if you're introducing new products? And have you guys had similar experiences and how did you kind of define those roles?
Yeah, well, my follow-up question for you just answered was when you said CS, is it support or success? Because the flavors of those roles are a little bit different. This is something that years later, it's a conversation that's literally in my red Slack button right there that's waiting for me after this. So we're revisiting that right now. And it's something that I think is totally okay to revisit over time. In our specific scenario, the support team wants to be more focused on the deep technical triaging, and the product specialist team wants to do more of the success and the guidance work, right? It sounds like in your scenario, that might not be the case. And I would say like maybe start by leaning into what do the individual teams feel like their zone of genius is, and then how do you map that to like what the customer explicitly needs. And, from there, if let's say customer needs technical help, do you have the support team do that? But then can you layer in the additional things that they want to get into? For example, like following up 2 days later and saying, hey, I know I helped you troubleshoot XYZ 2 days ago, but I took a look at your product usage and noticed that blank. Would you be interested in more recommendations there? So especially if you're a starter team, I would say lean into what the team is excited by, because you'll probably find there's plenty of problems that need to be solved. And if folks are excited about solving them, it's a good thing.
I'd love to wrap up if we can do a quick answer from each of you with what are some of the benefits you've seen and the outcome and support success metrics of moving to product led.
Yeah, I can go first. Especially at Nutanix, we saw like a hockey stick, like a growth in terms of usage. But over a period of time, what we saw that if somebody had taken the trial or test drive in this case, they were 2.5 times more likely to have a bigger ACV. Mm-hmm. And the velocity of closing that deal was on an average 2 weeks shorter than the rest. And so in terms of other things we also saw was it touched a lot of revenue, but again, because of attribution, we didn't really go there. But yeah, those are pretty much what we saw.
Those are awesome metrics. What about you, Karishma?
Yeah, I think from Vidyard's perspective, like user acquisition, I think really hit the roof with like the launch of our Chrome extension and the freemium plan. So we really saw massive benefits going back to that category creation point I had around like just driving top of funnel acquisition and getting the word out about our category. And then we've also seen massive revenue benefits just as a result of the ABM strategy and taking that bottoms up motion to like get to enterprise accounts. Like we've seen a ton of not just user acquisition, but also monetization and revenue as a result of the PLG strategy and being able to acquire more users at these enterprise accounts.
I love it. Rob, final statement.
I'll say one of the more fun things that we've noticed is we've really been able to increase the top of funnel, and we're seeing more new accounts and users from companies and use cases that we never would have seen before when we were only sales led and only targeting the best fit accounts. And so by nature of that, we're learning new ways that our product can be used to solve new problems that we didn't even know people would use. So switching to PLG and leaning more into the land and expand strategy definitely opened that up for us, which has been kind of cool.
I love it. So we're hearing experimentation and learning and revenue and bigger ACV and shorter time to value, which is awesome. I want to thank the three of you. If we can come off mute and give a round of applause to the three experts on this topic, truly experts. I learned so much in just 50 minutes. Really, really appreciate you letting us pick your brain on all of this. You are incredible. And thank you for everyone in the community who joined. And we hope to see you in more events and chatting in the Slack channel soon.
Thanks, everybody.